Hey, everybody. Welcome to Douglas Now's Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. I am Robert Preston Jr. We've got, I believe, a pretty interesting show for you here today. What we're going to do, as always, we're going to go over our top stories of the week that we've covered on DouglasNow.com, discuss a little bit about what's happened here, again, over the last few days in Douglas and Coffee County. And we do have a guest today. And in fact, if you've been watching the show and been following what we've been doing now over the last 5 or 6 weeks, you may notice that we have a different background today. And the reason that we have a different background is because we do have a guest, and guests are a feature of Beyond the Front Page that we would like to continue to do moving forward. And in fact, that's been our plan all along. So we had to alter the background. Background doesn't fit real well with having a guest. It's designed for a one-person show. So we had to alter that a little bit, and we're going to work on that moving forward so that we can continue to have a background while also being able to involve guests. We've got a number of very timely and important topics, I believe, to discuss over the next few weeks. We're already planning our shows out, so you'll definitely want to pay attention and watch what we're doing here. Again, through the month of June, we think it's going to be really neat. We're getting our feet wet with this, just kind of jumped into everything here over the last few weeks, but we're really trying to build an identity and build some continuity in what we discuss and how we do things. So pretty excited about that, and got some neat things that we're going to be talking about here as we move forward. First story I want to get to today. We had a county commission meeting on Monday, and I want to say this is the first county commission meeting that we've had since we've been doing Beyond the Front Page. And it was actually a pretty tame agenda, not a whole lot on there, no real hot button issues yet. Now, we've got some developments coming out of the county that we'll be talking about again moving forward, but those haven't quite been resolved yet to the point that we can discuss them. First item on the agenda was to appoint a replacement for Nina Lott on the Department of Family and Children Services Board. That unexpired term runs through June 30th, 2025. So Ms. Lott will be coming off of the board, and the county commission approved Reverend Vernon Talkington to fill her unexpired term. Again, that term will run through June 30th of 2025. County also voted to close a road. Justin Harold had submitted a petition to close a portion of Will Kirkland Road. To close Will Kirkland Road and a portion of Old Waycross Highway, beginning at Dewberry Road and running southeast to its intersection with Will Kirkland Road. Now, that, for those of you who may not know, that's a kind of a rather detailed way of saying it's out 158 East in the neighborhood of the new Dollar General. And when we talk about a new Dollar General, we have to be very specific with our location, because there are several new Dollar Generals in Douglas and Coffee County. But this is around the area of the Dollar General out on 158 East, headed toward Waycross. Interestingly enough, we're getting another new and even newer Dollar General in the city on North Madison Avenue and McNeil Drive, right beside Georgian Wood Apartments, across from Pilgrim's Pride. You know, they just built a new water tower out there, and there are a couple of old buildings on that property adjacent to the water tower. If you've headed north, headed out toward Coffee High School or going out toward Broxton, there at the End Market, I believe it is, on the left, used to be the Flash Foods, directly across the road to the east of that store on the hill there. They've been doing some construction now. Construction crews have been working for a couple of weeks, clearing those old buildings out, taking a couple of trees down. That is where they're going to plant the new Dollar General seeds with a little bit of water. The new Dollar General will spring up here in no time. So I've lost count on how many Dollar Generals we've got in Douglas and Coffee County. I think last time I counted, it was a minimum of 9. And I don't know if this one will be the 10th one or the 11th one, or however many we've added since then. And that's supposed to be what's the right word? Advanced is not really the right word. Progressive is not really the right word, but maybe This is supposed to be the best Dollar General that Dollar General can provide for a community our size. So it will not only be the newest, it is also billed at being the best. But anyway, nobody came to the commission to discuss either for or against this petition to close these particular roads. But again, unless you live out 158 East in the area, the Dollar General out there, this probably does not have a lot of interest for you, but it approved unanimously. So, so Will Kirkland Road and the portion of the Old Waycross Highway beginning at Dewberry Road and running to its intersection with Will Kirkland Road are now effectively closed. County also approved an alcohol license for Nayana Patel for the quick gas station located at 1656 US Highway 221 North in Douglas. So again, on 221 headed out toward Hazelhurst in the Oak Park area. It is one of those stores out there. Has an alcohol license. Couple of items on the agenda, kind of some administrative stuff dealing with a community development block grant project. Again, they run with abbreviations a lot of times or acronyms. It's a CDBG project with the Southern Regional Commission. This has to do with a project for Jacob Circle and the Daniels Way project. Going to pay the commission. If we get the grant, they're going to do the paperwork, apply for it. I think it's $60,000 to the regional commission. If we get the grant, the total project is going to be, well, they didn't say what the total project is going to be, but there's some engineering work that's going to have to be done for the amount of about $109,000 with drainage improvements and street improvements and stuff like that. So the grant is $1 million. So again, $60,000 to the regional commission if we get the grant, and then we'll have some expenditures related to preparing the plans for those projects. But we won't pay that unless we get the grant. Again, we get a lot of community development block grants. A lot of communities do. A lot of communities get CDBG funds. If it weren't for those funds, we wouldn't be able to maintain our roads and our streets in our neighborhoods the way that we do. Also, the county held the first reading of a rezoning request from Corey Carver for a little over 2 acres located at 1830 South Peterson Avenue. That will be going from R2 residential to commercial. Mr. Carver would like to put self-storage units out there on that lot. It's basically across Highway 441 from the Pilgrim's Pride hatchery. All right. So, if you're standing there with your back to the Pilgrim's Pride hatchery looking east across 441, it's out there. One of those parcels across the road from there. Everyone is in agreement with that. Planning Commission thinks it's okay. County code enforcement staff thinks it's okay. At the next meeting, they will have a second reading and a public hearing to see if that rezoning request will go through. So if you live in that area and you have an issue with potential self-storage buildings being built there, or self-storage buildings potentially being built there, you'll want to go to the next county commission meeting, which will actually be Tuesday, July 5th. They changed the date of the meeting. It's always the first Monday, but the first Monday of July is July 4th. So they obviously will not be meeting on July 4th. They will be meeting on July 5th. So that public hearing will be held on Tuesday, July 5th. Got a couple of bumpers that came off of the fire chief's new truck. He got a new pickup and he wanted new bumpers. The bumpers that came stock on the truck didn't fit well with the various attachments the chief needs on his pickup. So they took the old bumpers off, which are basically new old bumpers, and they're going to put those on Gov Deals. So if you need a bumper, I believe it's for a Dodge. I think it's what I remember them saying. But at any rate, if you need a new bumper for a heavy duty pickup, pay attention to Gov Deals and you might can pick up the fire chief's bumpers pretty cheap. And the last item on the agenda was the purchase of a 1993 International fire truck from SMJ Equipment out in Texas. We've got an older fire truck with a blown engine. They can rebuild the motor for $8,000 or $10,000, but there are other issues. The truck is so old, hard to get parts, hard to maintain. A unit that old. So they found this 1993 International with very low miles, very low hours. The county can buy it for $26,000. So the county commission approved that request. So they're going to send some folks out to Texas, and if the truck checks out, they will drive that back to Douglas and Coffee County. So again, that was the news out of the county commission meeting. Rather boring and mundane stuff. One story that we published on the day that we are taping Beyond the Front Page is getting a little bit of traction. Josh Raley has been arrested and jailed for allegedly stealing a truck, a flatbed straight truck with a tanker behind it. The tanker was there for to haul diesel exhaust fluid, which will heretofore be termed as DEF. So truck and DEF tank. Mr. Raley is accused of breaking into the fence at Deep South Farm Supply, stealing that truck, taking it out in the western portion of Coffee County, out near Hebron Church, on a dirt road off of Hebron Church Road, and shooting holes in the DEF tank and catching the truck on fire and burning it. So apparently Mr. Raley was an employee of Deep South Farm Supply. He was unhappy with some things going on at work. This is according to people we talked to, according to folks with knowledge of the situation. And this was the 31st of May, so it was last Tuesday, about 3 o'clock in the morning. He had somebody take him out there to 7th Street, which is where Deep South Farm Supply is, right there with Waldron Farm Supply, all right there together. Broke into the fence, allegedly stole the truck, and then caught it on fire and shot it. He has been charged with a number of charges, being held in the Coffee County Jail without bond. So again, a pretty rough situation, and something that you hate to see all the way around. You hate to see it for everybody involved. Obviously, there's something going on, all accounts. Until here recently, Mr. Raley had been a very good employee, and apparently something's not right that caused him to allegedly do this. So again, that's a story we've had on. You can check it out on the Douglas Now Facebook page and also on DouglasNow.com website and get more details on that. Nichols has been the focal point of kind of the center of the Coffee County news universe here for about the last week or so. Now we want to back up to November. Back in November, nearly the entire police force, along with the police chief and several other county employees, abruptly resigned. All right. So the county sheriff's department covered law enforcement in Nichols until the city was able to put a new chief and a new police force in place. So it took a few weeks, but they got that taken care of, and things have been running pretty smoothly up in Nichols since then. That is until last week, when the relatively new police chief and all 6 police officers abruptly resigned, once again leaving Nichols without any law enforcement presence at all. The county, of course, stepped up and again sent deputies over to patrol Nichols to make sure that the community had law enforcement around the clock. In the meantime, Nichols city government began talking with former police chief Jamie Merritt. Now, Mr. Merritt was chief back in November. He was one of the first wave of resignations, and they were able to reach an agreement and bring Mr. Merritt back to the city of Nichols, something that a lot of people in Nichols are very happy about. By all accounts, Mr. Merritt was a very good chief and did a good job over in Nichols. Trying to find out exactly what happened and why there were resignations. It comes on the heels of a new administration, a new mayor, several new council members. Don't know if that had anything to do with it or to what degree that played a role in the resignations. Nobody's saying. I don't want to speculate, but that was the first wave of resignations came right at the end of the election. So again, you've got to think that it had something to do with it. Exactly what? Don't really know. And everybody's been pretty quiet about this second wave of resignations. We did an open records request. We did a story on it, but it doesn't say a whole lot, as we expected. I mean, you don't really expect people to air everything that's going on in an open records request or in a, or in any documents that would be open to the public. So, you can kind of read between the lines and speculate and draw your own conclusion. You're probably pretty close to figuring out what it was. But Don't want to get into all that here. The important thing is that last night, the day we're taping this on Tuesday, on Monday night, up in Nichols at the city council meeting, the Nichols City Council unanimously approved Jamie Merritt as the chief of police. So Jamie is back. They swore him in immediately, and I would imagine that he reported to work. He has already reported to work in the city of Nichols. So Mr. Merritt is back. Chief Merritt is back in Nichols, and that seemed to be based on the comments that we've gotten on our Facebook post that we made about it with a photo. Most people are pretty well happy with that. Again, by all accounts, Jamie was a fine chief and did a good job, and now he's back and will continue to build upon the work that he did when he was there first time. So those are just a few of the top stories that we've covered. A lot more on the Douglas Now Facebook page, a lot more on DouglasNow.com. So please go take a look at it, read those stories. Feel free to comment off of the Facebook page. A lot going on, a lot happening, some good, some not so good. One of the things you'll notice if you go back and you look at the content that we've been posting here over the past couple of weeks, we are sort of moving, I don't want to say in a different direction, but we're opening up our news coverage to new directions. And we want to talk more about what's happening in the court system, because there's a lot that goes on at the courthouse that most people don't know about it. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I'm sure we do a pretty good job of reporting on who gets arrested. We don't do a very good job of following these cases through the judicial system to their ultimate resolution one way or the other. All right. So, a lot of cases, charges get reduced. Sometimes charges get dropped. Sometimes defendants go to court and are acquitted. And then, of course, sometimes they are convicted. But most of the time, we really don't know exactly how many or exactly how these cases are resolved. I think we do a pretty good job with the high profile cases, with the murder cases, but there are many, many other cases that we just never cover. So that's one of the things that we've been trying to cover. Motions for new trials, different things like that. So if you're paying attention to Douglas Now, you'll notice there's more stories like that. And again, we want to let people know what's happening in the criminal justice system. There's always an interest in true crime, and we want to make sure that we do as good a job as we can to keep the citizens in Coffee County informed with what is going on throughout the county. All right. That's one area that we haven't done a very good job on. We're trying to do a much better job moving forward. So again, check us out, DouglasNow.com or the Douglas Now Facebook page, and you'll see all the stories that we've been posting. And I think you can get a pretty good snapshot of what is happening in Douglas and Coffee County. Thank you for tuning in here on our first segment. We're going to take a break, and then we will be right back in just a moment with our guest, Ian Sansott, Assistant District Attorney. We're going to talk about some of the developments in the Tara Grinstead murder case. And there have been a number of new developments, and we're going to spend a few minutes with him and discuss exactly what these developments are, what they mean, and what may or may not happen moving forward. Thanks for tuning in on our first segment. We'll be right back in just a moment.
So I'm 12 years old. My dad buys a hardware store. Dad worked really hard. He worked 3 jobs. He taught high school science, he ran the hardware store, and he sold insurance at night. Dad's work ethic and honesty has made a big impact on me as an advisor. We learned the value of money. We learned what money could do. Working in that store, we learned what money meant to people. Being a breadwinner, taking care of family, providing a roof over our heads. We worked all these years to get to this place called retirement. And whether you like to fish, golf, go to restaurants, play with the grandkids, travel, a good solid retirement income plan can help you do the things that you want to do. It allows you to retire with confidence. And at Story Wealth Management Group, we work with people in retirement and before retirement. We don't know what to expect in retirement. You've never done it before. But we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 25 years to help with that new reality called retirement. At Story Wealth Management Group, we work hard to make sure we address all the issues that may come up to help make sure that you reach your goals. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. But it's not about me. It's about your future. It's about your family. It's about your story.
Welcome back to Douglas Now's Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. I am Robert Preston Jr., and I am joined by our Assistant District Attorney here in Douglas and Coffee County, specifically in general, the Waycross Judicial Circuit, Ian Sansott. Thank you, Ian.
Excuse me. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a big step up from talking in front of your iPhone.
In front of the iPhone, in the jury assembly room with just you and I don't know if it's better to have both of us on here or not, but historic day. We are backgroundless, and we also have our first commercial break and our first guest. So it's fantastic day. Thank you for being a part of history.
Yeah, it can only go up from here for future guests. I promise you that.
One of the things we want to talk about here, and this has kind of captivated, I was going to say the entire state, but it goes much, much farther than that. The Tara Grinstead case. And again, we're not going to go in with any background with the Grinstead case. If you don't know what it is, it will not take you long to familiarize yourself with it. All right. But it goes back to 2005. It is an absolutely unbelievable case with a number of twists and turns, most of which have taken place in the last 5 years. Delayed, of course, like everything else by COVID. This case should have been taken care of and should have been resolved several years ago, but because of COVID, it has pressed on and carried on. And now we have just gotten some semblance of resolution here a few weeks ago to bring us up to speed. Ryan Duke, who was charged with murder in the Grinstead case with Tara Grinstead's disappearance, was acquitted by a jury in Irwin County just a few weeks ago. He was acquitted of murder. He was convicted of concealing the death of another person. Now, that carries a 10-year sentence, all right? He's already been in jail for 5 years. He was arrested in 2017. So he has 5 more years to serve if he is going to complete that 10-year sentence, which is exactly what the judge sentenced him to. However, because of the sentencing guidelines and what have you, he is actually eligible for parole on that charge right now because he's been in jail for 5 years. Now, Mr. Assistant District Attorney, when people hear that someone is eligible for parole, they automatically assume that they're going to get parole.
Yeah,
but
they assume they're getting out.
Right, but he even though he is eligible for parole, that does not at all mean that he is going to get parole.
Yeah, if I had to, given the nature of the case and everything, I would expect him to be serving most of that sentence in prison. Just without looking at the grid, that's how it is to determine whether or not somebody gets, whether or not they're eligible and all that, and when they get out. I would expect him to be serving most of that.
I kind of figured that too. I figured, said, he could get time served,
and that's before we get into the other stuff.
Right. And there are a lot more twists and turns other than that. Now, interestingly enough, I found out this morning, again on the day that we're filming this, which is Tuesday afternoon, that Mr. Duke has been sent to prison. He has been transferred to Jackson today, to the Georgia Diagnostic State Prison up there, where he will begin his sentence and then be possibly transferred out from there to the institution where he will serve the remainder of his sentence. However, that's not the only problem that Mr. Duke has. So he has been charged additionally since his acquittal. So take us through that.
All right. So Friday, the news broke that so the murder trial that he was acquitted of, convicted of concealing death, was in Irwin County. In Ben Hill County, he was recently indicted, or at least the indictment was opened. It was unsealed on Friday. When a grand jury hears a case, those cases are then sealed in an envelope, and they're not opened until they're in open court. It's to help protect the grand jurors and all that stuff. It's just part of the proceedings. So I'm not sure what day the grand jury would have heard the evidence in this. It probably wasn't long before it was opened. I imagine they tried to set it up to get it open straight away. But on Friday, it was announced that he was indicted by a grand jury in Ben Hill County for 6 new charges in Ben Hill County, not in Irwin County, in Ben Hill County. They are 1 count of concealing the death of another, 1 count of hindering in the apprehension or punishment of a criminal, 2 counts of concealment of facts, and 2 counts of tampering with evidence. So that he's got new charges now in Ben Hill County. The charges are new. The facts that make them up go back to 2005. But
and all these are obviously felony charges.
yes, yeah. As alleged, I believe they're all felony charges.
Now,
Yes.
so I know there are a lot of different legal avenues to explore with this case in general, but with these new charges in particular, is this unusual? I mean, I know we've got some statute of limitations deals or issues to deal with. Of course, there's no statute of limitations on murder, but there are with some of these other charges. Again, it goes back to 2005, which is 17 years ago now. So that statute of limitations has from 2005 have run out, but I know the prosecution is alleging that that's not when the clock starts ticking.
Right.
So what are we looking at here?
Okay. Well, you asked a couple different questions. So the first one was, is this unusual? And I would say yes, but I would also say that everything about this case is unusual. There are 2 defendants that have predominantly been charged in this across 3 counties. Because you had Wilcox County, Bo Dukes was charged in Wilcox County with false statements, and I think some other things. He's already been convicted of that. He was charged in Ben Hill County. Ryan Duke was charged in Irwin County. And of course, you've got this case going back 15 plus years to the actual incident date. So there's a lot about this case that's kind of unusual from the get-go. The other thing you mentioned, and this is going to be the thing, in my opinion, this is going to be the argument that will be dealt with. And it'll, no matter what the trial court does, there will be an appeal on the issue, and that has to do with the statute of limitations. The incident, of course, occurred back in 2005. That was when Miss Grinstead disappeared. So the statute of limitations on most felony cases, and all of these felony cases are alleged, is only 4 years. Murder has no statute of limitations, but the rest of these is only 4 years. So normally we'd be looking at about 2009 that the clock on the statute of limitations stopped and you can't prosecute. There's an exception, or really 2 exceptions in Georgia law, when the crime is unknown and when the person is unknown. Under those circumstances, the clock on the statute of limitations doesn't start ticking until the state, which is going to be the investigating law enforcement agency, prosecutors, an officer within that agency, once they know about the crime, first of all, and then who did it. Those are the 2 things. In this indictment, they allege that because when you are saying that the statute of limitations hasn't run, you have to include that in the indictment. So they did. That the statute of limitations was told that the crime was unknown. So that's how they're traveling over there, is that the crime wasn't actually known until February of 2017, which is when I believe Bo Dukes gave his initial statement in Wilcox County. I think it might have been somewhere else. I didn't follow all that closely, but I think it's Bo Dukes' statements that they're alleging is when the crime was actually known. So the question is and the issue that's going to be dealt with in this is whether or not did they know. There was evidence that came out during this trial that back in 2005, there was at least one witness who came forward with Bo Dukes' name, as well as might have even been Ryan Duke or just his roommate or something like that. I think it was Ryan Duke, actually. Both of their names. So there was some information that they were known back in 2005. I want to say there was another witness that came forward in 2008 that might have mentioned them as well. And so the defense is going to be, this is going to be the main argument. There's going to be several arguments made, but that is going to be the main argument, that reaching back to 2005, law enforcement knew that this crime had been committed. They knew who did it. And for whatever reason, no further investigation was made. No arrest was made until later.
No, hang on. The significance of Ben Hill County is because that's where Tara's body was supposedly taken
Right.
to the pecan orchard. Everybody knows the
Right.
pecan orchard. The pecan orchard was in Ben Hill County. So you had the crime took place in Irwin County, but the destruction of the body was in Ben Hill County.
Correct.
So this is where Ben Hill County kicks in. And it's interesting, and I do know that there was evidence that, both Bo and Ryan's names were mentioned back in 2005. And I don't think law enforcement took that seriously, but they did go to the pecan orchard. And as I understand it, kind of looked around and said, we don't see anything. That's just a couple of kids drunk at a party. And then they moved on. So, there was evidence of that, but they didn't, they, for whatever reason, officers at the time did not take that seriously. So that will be an interesting argument. I don't think the officers like that when that gets mentioned, but I mean, but it happened.
Well,
it
one
happened.
of them, I think, if I remember right, one of them on the stand during the trial basically said, I wish we would have looked into that. We dropped the ball on that. And I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. If you miss something, it's easy to say, I wish I would have followed up on that. But there's actually very little case law on this too, by the way, on this statute of limitations issue. And I don't really, this is not, in my opinion, this is not going to be a clean cut. It's obviously this way. There's a lot of legal experts and everything who have their opinions that it is clear cut. I don't know that it is so clear cut. The one of the few cases I'm aware of is a Supreme Court case from 2019. It's Riley v. State. It's one of the few cases that deals with this kind of issue. And the case, the court basically, they're analyzing this issue and they're saying, well, just because, somebody's name is known, that shouldn't start the clock. Just because you have a random tip with someone's name doesn't mean that the clock starts. So what the court has said is basically that law enforcement needed to have probable cause. It's at the point that an officer or an agency has probable cause to make an arrest. Once that happens, that's what starts the clock. That was dealing with the person unknown exception. So that case was an old burglary case. Somebody broke into a house, they left some DNA behind. Years later, it got tested and it matched DNA that was already in a database. And so they ended up charging them. And so that's the case the court dealt with. And they basically said, well, the person wasn't known. They didn't have probable cause until it was tested. The other interesting thing about that case is what they say is it has to be within the actual knowledge of law enforcement. So a lot of people will, as they look at this issue, they'll be asking, well, why didn't they follow up? If the fact that they didn't follow up on something, does that mean that the statute of limitations actually started, the clock on it started ticking? And the answer is no. It's what they actually know. Because in that case, the DNA that was collected had been in the state's custody. I don't know if it was a crime lab or law enforcement or which, but it was within their custody since they got it. It presumably could have been tested a couple of years before it was, but it didn't get tested until later. So as a result, it's still fine. It has to be in the actual knowledge of law enforcement. So the question I think is really going to turn on back in 2005, because there was one individual, it was a third party who said, we were there. We were out drinking. I heard Bo talk about this is what me and Ryan did, and whether or not that is going to amount to probable cause. And like I said, I could see the answer being no. I can see the answer being yes. Ultimately, like I said, whatever happens, the trial court will rule on it. If the trial court denies it, it'll be appealed. And ultimately, one of our appellate courts will decide this issue. If it's denied or if it's granted, I assume the state will appeal. And either way, an appellate court will look at this and decide. So it's going to set some new precedents on statute of limitations issues, how much law enforcement knows, what amounts to that probable cause.
Now, let me ask you this, because obviously, no matter what you believe happened, I think it's fairly certain that these two individuals were involved. Now, what role they played, we don't really know yet. I mean, I say we don't know. I mean, you've got a confession, and I know you have your thoughts and opinions on that. You know, I mean, Ryan did say, I did it, you know, and then he came back and said, well, maybe I didn't do it. Bo did it. But, you know, for the most part, the way this case has developed, these two in some shape, form, or fashion were the ones who killed and destroyed Terry Grinstead's body. All right. Now, didn't get a murder conviction. There's no plans, as best I can tell, to come back and try to charge Bo with the murder because there's no evidence against Bo. You just have Ryan who said he did it, but you've got no evidence, and you really don't have any evidence against Ryan except for his confession, which should be pretty compelling, but apparently to the jury in Irwin County, it was not. So there's really nowhere to go for a murder conviction. Are these extra charges? Is this an attempt in trying to make sure that these guys spend as much time as possible? I mean, I hate to use the term, you know, vindictive prosecution, but you know, I know that is a term. But are we looking at something like that, or is this valid?
Well, is it valid? I don't really know how to answer that.
Well, I know that when I asked that question, I said that wasn't that was kind of a stupid question to ask, but that's why I don't like asking questions very much, because I'm going to ask a dumb one.
Especially to a lawyer who picks apart any given word.
Right.
Is this? Yeah, I would think so. Especially given, I mean, the timing of it is also telling. Obviously, this wasn't indicted until after the acquittal. Had they indicted before the acquittal, and then it's okay, well, there's an acquittal, now you got to deal with this, then kind of harder to argue that. So, I mean, I would think so. And I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Now, obviously, if you think that Ryan Duke has been through enough or has been sentenced enough for whatever he's done with all of this, then you're not going to like it. But from a legal perspective, there's nothing wrong with that. Prosecutors prosecute. That's what we do. If there's a crime that's been committed, we have a duty to prosecute. I kind of tend to think that and I don't know this, I don't know the inner workings of their office at all. I haven't discussed this with any of them at all, but I would guess they thought, because, you know, obviously he admitted to stuff. I think he testified to doing stuff in Ben Hill County. That's what he's charged with here. But I think they thought, well, we got this murder case. If he's convicted of murder, we're not getting any extra time because the only possible sentence for murder is life in prison. So they didn't bother with the indictment on that because it kind of would have been pointless. And at that point, they had his confession. I honestly would have thought, well, we're good here. But then, and I don't say this to disparage the verdict of the jury, because obviously there was evidence presented by the defense about the character of both Bo Dukes and Ryan Duke. All right, I mix up sometimes which one has an S and which one doesn't.
I think we all,
the only one.
No, we all do. I still to this day double check. Wait, is that the right one? Is that the S or no S?
I have the indictment, a copy of it here, and I keep looking down to make sure I'm saying it right. But I don't know where it was, but you know, and then when the acquittal happened, it's, well, he says he didn't do this, but he admits he did this other stuff in Ben Hill County, so he should be held accountable for the things that he admits that he did in Ben Hill County, that he testified that he did when he was in Ben Hill County. So the other thing you mentioned was vindictive prosecution, which is something I've seen thrown around online. Like I said, prosecutors prosecute. That's what they do. Vindictive prosecution is a civil claim. If somebody wants to sue somebody for vindictive prosecution or malicious prosecution, one of the things, there's several elements to that, but one of the things they have to show is that whatever the prosecution was resulted favorably to them. So either the charges were dismissed or they were acquitted of the charge. That's the first thing. So we can't even approach the issue of vindictive or malicious prosecution and stuff until the case is resolved. Because obviously, if he's convicted, there's no malicious prosecution. He's been found guilty. That's one of the elements of that. But that's, like I said, it's one of the elements. There's others as well. And you're really not going to be able to show that, I don't think, because like I said, prosecutors prosecute. If a prosecutor is prosecuting a case, they're doing their job. you can disagree, you may not like it, you may not like how it's done, but that's the job. So you can't really doesn't give a right to sue, or at least a right to win the lawsuit. Anybody can sue at any time for anything. But
I got two more questions for you. First question: Do these charges? And I've heard some people mention this, and I don't think so, but obviously I'm not an attorney. Do these new charges, they don't cross any double jeopardy lines or anything, do they?
Not at all. What Ryan Duke was tried for was in Irwin County. There were crimes that occurred within the boundaries of Irwin County. What he's now charged with are crimes that he's alleged to have committed within the boundaries of Ben Hill County. So these are different crimes that occurred at a different location at a different time. Even if it's part of one big string of events, which this certainly would have been, I assume, double jeopardy that's not even in the ballpark of the issues involved in this case anyway. Like I said, I'll be interested to watch and see what happens with the statute of limitations issues, because that's going to be the big argument, I would think.
Second question, the last one for you. We already know more than likely he's in prison for 5 more years. All right. And he has been transferred out of the Irwin County jail. That's where Mr. Duke spent his first 5 years. His last 5 years will be spent in the state system, in a state prison somewhere. Now, if this goes through, these new charges go through, and he is convicted on those charges, how much time are we looking potentially at adding to the 5 years he will already be serving?
Okay. When I did the math for what each of these carries, I think lawyers often say we're not good at math. That's why we studied law, but I think the total is 45 years. That said, the way this indictment is drafted, to me, when I reviewed this, a prosecutor can charge a person as many different ways for one act if they want to, but ultimately you can only be sentenced for one of those. So if there's a case where somebody committed an aggravated assault by shooting a person and they killed them, and so they're also charged with murder, so the prosecutor can charge them with both aggravated assault and can charge them with murder, can charge them with both. But ultimately, that defendant only did one thing. They pointed the gun, they pulled the trigger, and that's it. So the appellate courts require, basically, it's the wording is what's the unit of prosecution? How many things can you be convicted of and sentenced for how many things that you've done? Some of these include elements that are not in others. So one of his charges is hindering the apprehension of punishment of a criminal, that in destroying Tara Grinstead's body, he was trying to help prevent Bo Dukes from getting into trouble, basically. That count is different from concealing her death. Even though it's they're related, it's from the same act, there's a different element to it. So those necessarily may not merge. Some of these or get vacated. I forget which one it is or how it'll be with these. But some of these counts might do that. I haven't done the legal research on each and every one of these counts to see how they would, if there's any case law on it, or if this will tread new ground with that kind of stuff too. But it's entirely possible that some of these counts may end up merging or get vacated or something like that if he's convicted of everything, because they all stem from destroying Tara Grinstead's body or moving her body. I think one of the counts involves moving her body from one location to another. But several of them are about destroying her body or covering up her body. So ultimately, we may not be looking at 45 years. It's likely less than that, depending on if some of these end up merging or are vacated. But certainly the maximum, I think, if my math is right, is 45 years.
Well, Ryan is probably, and I haven't tried to math this out, just kind of eyeballing in my head, he's probably in his mid-30s. So, if you're looking at 5 years plus potentially, again, and potentially is a big word, but potentially 45 years on top of that, if convicted, you're looking at 50 years in prison. These mid-30s, you're looking at well past 80 years old before he would ever get out, assuming he served every minute of that sentence. Bo Dukes already has a significant sentence ahead of him, and then some other charges that are extremely serious that he's yet to go to trial for. So in all likelihood, we're saying that if he is convicted, he's about the same age. You're looking at potentially both of these guys spending the rest of their lives in prison, even though there's no murder conviction. Now, I don't know how that would make the family feel. Again, never got the murder conviction, but if the two people who are responsible and who I believe are responsible, and I think everybody else in some shape, form, or fashion believes are responsible for Terry Grinstead's death, end up spending the majority of the rest of their lives behind bars, I think that's pretty solid, I would think. Now, again, there's no murder conviction, but you've got these two individuals spending a significant amount of time in prison, again, basically the rest of their lives. So I would think in some way you could successfully argue that justice has been served. But again, that's assuming that these charges here that Ryan that they go through, Ryan gets convicted and gets the maximum possible sentence. So I think you could fairly successfully argue that justice has been served. As a prosecutor, would that satisfy you?
Oh yeah. I often tell victims in cases, it's not necessarily about getting depending on the crime, there's obviously different levels, but the most serious stuff like what's going on here, it's not necessarily giving these defendants getting what they deserve, but a lot of times it's what we can based on what the evidence is in the case. And obviously the evidence, according to the jury, was insufficient to convict in Irwin County. I would think, based on the testimony that I watched, if this survives the kind of procedural issues, I think he's going to have a bad day in Ben Hill County, but we'll see what happens there. But it's about getting what you can on some of it.
And the bottom line here is, even though we have an acquittal, this case is far, far, far from over. There are a lot of twists and turns yet to be taken. And if I understand it correctly, Ryan's attorneys took the case pro bono, so they've got a lot of work ahead of them.
Yeah, if they're staying on, and I haven't seen anything saying that they're coming off at all.
I hadn't either. They're going to do a lot of work for free.
Well, I imagine they're going to stay on. So,
well, they might have the opportunity to make a lot of money afterwards with some post-trial publicity, and I'm sure there'll be books and movies. I mean, there's at the very least a Lifetime movie in here somewhere.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a Netflix docu-series at some point, a dramatization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to make light of this at all. I mean, there are tentacles going out from this case that we'll see for years and years and years to come, depending on how well. I mean, even right now, if it ended right now, you're still going to see all that stuff. I mean, this is a case that has captivated a large portion of our country for a very, very long time. People all over the United States are familiar with this case and familiar with the developments. And we're right here in South Georgia, sort of in the center of the news universe for all the wrong reasons. But you're going to see a lot more from this moving forward. So even though we have an acquittal, it's not over yet. So Ryan Duke has been transferred. He is in the state prison system now. He is out of Irwin County. And then we have these other charges, and there's no telling how long it'll take. I mean, I know this is a loaded question, and I said I wasn't going to ask you another one, but this will be the last one I ask you. Do you have any idea how long it'll take to resolve this? We're looking at 2-3 years, or 6 months?
No, I'd assume it'd be a few years. I mean, the biggest thing in getting this case to trial outside of COVID is the volume of what this case file is, getting it to the other side, make sure everyone has an opportunity to dig through it. At this point, they've gone through it. I don't know that there's factually going to be many surprises in this trial if and when it gets there. But I don't know. He's got to have an arraignment. There's going to be, the other thing is there's going to be motions that are going to be filed to dismiss this from the defense. And then if the trial court, I'm sure if those are denied, they can ask for a certificate of immediate review, which then sends it right up to an appellate court before you even get to trial. If that happens, that'll add a year or two right there. Or possibly more, because I assume it would first go to the Court of Appeals, and then, depending on if somebody doesn't like the result there, then up to the Supreme Court of Georgia. So, if that gets granted, then yeah, I mean that tacks on even more.
There's a possibility he could almost be through serving this last 5 years before any of this stuff develops. So we've got a long time left to continue to talk about this and continue to follow this. So Ian, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Folks, thank everybody for watching. We're going to do this again with guests, and we will also have Ian on periodically. We like to talk about various issues in the criminal justice system. And Ian is Douglas Now's legal analyst, whether he knows it or not.
Does not speak well of the Douglas Now.
I don't know if that speaks well for either one of us, but no, Ian has been a good friend to us, and we value his insight and his opinion. And again, there are a lot of things that happen in the criminal justice system that people don't understand, and you can't look at these cases, even something like this, with a blanket approach. And you have to realize that there are idiosyncrasies with each case. There are, I hate to use the word technicality because that brings up a whole different meaning, but there are nuances. That's the word I was looking for. There are nuances with each case that deal with sentencing and bond and things like that. And a lot of times people, when they see stories and they see charges and they see crimes, they don't quite understand exactly what it means. They try to apply tests, blanket tests to every crime, and you can't do that because there are all kinds of things that go into play that you have to consider. So when we have questions about these kinds of things, we a lot of times bring Ian in. He's been very good about discussing these with us, and we will continue to do so moving forward. Thank you again, sir.
My pleasure.
And once again, thank everybody for watching. You have been tuning in to Douglas Now's Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. We'll be back next week at the same time. We'll see you then.